Okay. It's weird. I always thought like the way people start videos the same way every time, kind of like trying to have a catchphrase or something. I always thought it was stupid or whatever. But I realized I start all my videos just naturally. I didn't plan it at all. I didn't care about that. I'll say like, okay, or all right, or something. I guess that's my little catchphrase. Anyways, my intro, as it were. Anyways, I've been banging out the videos lately. I got a new one to rip on the PlayStation 5, and this huge thing that no one in the games media is talking about at all. Well, very few. I saw a few commenters on Reset Era talking about it, but, you know, like 1 out of 20. No one is mentioning this. It's a big red herring. It's kind of really weird. And I'm going to say a little fake that nobody's talking about this. Because it's a huge, obvious elephant in the room. Alright, so Linus Tech Tips, whatever, that guy, just made a vid. And I have not watched the vid. And I proudly have not watched the vid. A lot of people say, like, oh, how can you comment on us on that? Bullshit. If you haven't even watched it, bullshit, I don't care. If I don't feel like watching it, I'm not going to watch it. Okay? Too bad. So I haven't watched this video, and I'm not going to watch the video unless, I don't know, maybe I will someday, whatever. But I'm not watch the video. Do you know why I don't watch the video? Because I don't want to watch the video. I don't want to sit through the usual 12 minutes of Linus being boring to get to a 30-second point. You know? I mean, of course, I will watch those if I'm interested in the whole 12 minutes. But you know how YouTube videos are. They all got to be 10 minutes because that's what the algorithm likes. So, they make your way through all this junk. Well, look who's talking. Me with my 30-minute long form videos or whatever you want to call them. Anyways, so I haven't watched the video, but I already know what it's about and what he says from online reaction. Basically, he praises the PS5 and the PS5's SSD system. How it's so great, it gives users choice, it's going to lead to lower costs, it's the bee's knees, it's I think he said faster as well. Well, we'll get to that. Here's the problem, Linus and everybody who's the elephant in the room. I'm sure a lot of people know this, and they're just, because they're PlayStation fanboys dominate discussion on the internet, they're just purposely not talking about it. Here's the big elephant in the room. It's a little thing that people love to, funny, they sure love to talk about it when it comes to Xbox having a problem with it or anything else. They sure do know what it is the rest of the time. But all of a sudden they all forgot, apparently, when it comes to this topic. It's a little thing called lowest common denominator. What it means is, if you are a developer, okay, you target a certain spec when you make your game. Okay? Anyone who's been in computer land for long would already know this, but so it means that it's very important to know that every machine, this is one of the big advantages of consoles, every machine that you're making something on has a certain feature. Otherwise, you may not use that feature because not very many people support it. I'm trying to think of a good example. Ray tracing, okay? If, like, Xbox sold 2 consoles, right? And the Series X supported ray tracing and the Series S didn't support ray tracing. That's a problem. Why? Because if you're making games for Xbox, you're going to go, well, half my user base doesn't have ray tracing. You know, I'm going to have to spend more money to make the Series X version have ray tracing. But the Series S owners are not going to get ray tracing no matter what because it doesn't support it. So you know what? I'm just not going to support ray tracing. That's what happens. That's what always happens. And or it can be any feature. It can be, you know, a hardware feature, anything. That's one of the great things about consoles, okay? They're a certain spec, not as much anymore, but the idea is they're a certain spec, and you know that I don't like the Series S at all. I have a whole video, a whole 30-minute video of how much I hate the Xbox Series S. I hate everything it stands for, exactly because of this lowest common denominator problem. But I will say that with the Series S, at least it has the same GPU architecture. You know, it supports the same features. It has the same, almost more importantly, it has the same CPU. It has the same 8 cores in the CPU and 16 threads. You know, it has the same SSD speed. Everything from a feature set is supported. It's just generally slower, less RAM, okay? Now again, I still hate the Series S. Do not mistake that for me saying it's a good idea. But at least the lowest common denominator problem is somewhat mitigated because it's not like it's supporting an old DirectX 9 GPU or it doesn't support the modern features and things like that. And now, everybody knows about this lowest common denominator thing. Let me remind you of when it was used to beat Xbox over the head. I remember a long time ago, they used to have something called the Xbox 360, right? And it had a hard drive. And then they came out with something called the Xbox 360 Core system that did not have a hard drive, okay? It only had a DVD drive. Oh my gosh. The weeping and the gnashing of teeth and the angst and the crying and the fake concern trolling from the Sony fanboys was like immense. And it went on for years in the media that were supposedly not Sony fanboys. It went on for years. Because here was the thing that they would say, like, oh, every console needs to support a hard drive because they load faster. By not supporting a hard drive, you know, the core Xbox 360 is gimping games, you know, because every developer knows that he doesn't know for sure that he has a hard drive to fall back on, so it's gimping games, right? That's what they'd say. Like, there was even a thing that supposedly, I remember that the Sony fanboys completely made this up, because there were no games that, of course why they did this was because PS3, they all had hard drives. If, like, the PS3 had a version that didn't have a hard drive, then they would have never said nothing, because both sides would have had the problem. But since only Xbox had this caveat, of course they made this huge deal out of it for years about how, and I remember they even lied and said all this junk about, Grand Theft Auto 4, I think it was. Might have even been 5. Whatever the Grand Theft Auto is that came out on Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. I don't really play Grand Theft Auto, so I don't care. They said, you can't fly. I remember there was some people on the internet saying the reason you can't fly and you don't have a plane, or I guess maybe you can fly. I don't remember what it was. No, I think you can't fly. I think you can't fly. Yeah. I'm going to say you can't fly. Hopefully I'm right. I think they were saying you can't fly in the game, and the reason is because of Xbox and the Xbox 360 core system and its DVD drive. It couldn't load the world in fast enough, so everybody lost out on, all the consoles lost out on flying because of the stupid Xbox 360 and its core system without a hard drive, on only a DVD drive. Like, they made that up. They actually said that, you know, of course it's completely false because there was a bunch of, like, Xbox 360 exclusives that played just the same as any other game, you know. There was no real evidence that games were somehow gimped on Xbox 360. In fact, almost every game ran better on Xbox 360, by the way, than on PlayStation 3 that generation. But, you know, they'd make up something like, oh, you know, Grand Theft Auto, they cut flying because of the Xbox 360. You know, no proof, no absolutely nothing, but they passed it around enough to everybody kind of started believing it, you know. So, like I said, this is just to point out that the Sony fanboys sure do understand the lowest common denominator issue when it came to Xbox, you know. But all of a sudden, nobody's even mentioning this. Well, I have seen some comments mention on Reset Era, as I said. But almost nobody in the mainstream gaming media, who are off Sony shills, most of them, you know, nobody's talking about this. Here's the thing. The PlayStation 5, I'm sure you remember, it had a weaker GPU, right? And one of the big things on its fanboys would tout that it was going to make up the gap, because the Series X had 12 teraflops and the PS5 had like 9 teraflops. They claimed 10.2, but that's when it's like max clock and it can down clock. So I'm skeptical, but whatever. Even if you say it's 10.2, it had less teraflops, right? So, but they'd say like, oh, but it's got the SSD because the SSD of the PS5 was faster, right? It was like super fast, like hyper, high speed tech, so fast. And the Xbox Series X had a real fast not hard drive, SSD. When I say hard drive, I mean SSD. So the Xbox Series X had a really fast SSD too, but it wasn't like the PS5 one was like really bleeding edge. Like they didn't even have PC drives that fast when it came out. So granted, the PS5 SSD was a little faster than the Xbox Series X. Now this wasn't going to help it, okay? Because the Sony fanboys started trying to say like, act like the PS5 SSD renders graphics. They did. They'd say like, oh, in the future, the assets are going to need to be loaded in so fast that when you spin around, they're going to load right from the SSD. It's like you don't even have, they made up all this nonsense. PS fanboys will go to the ends of the earth to try to justify whatever hardware decisions Sony made. I remember them, they were basically saying like, oh, the real limiter now is the speed of the SSD, like utter nonsense. Like your graphics. I use this argument so many times. I got this argument on Twitter, message boards, whatever, and I would always use the analogy. I would say like, okay, so if I'm building a badass gaming PC, okay, what's the first thing I'm worried about? Is it the GPU? Do I want to make sure I have a beefy graphics card? Let's say given the same CPU even, or am I going like, man, first I gotta get the best. I gotta get the most bleeding edge SSD in the world, and I'll worry about I can just get it, or would you rather have a gaming PC with like a super fast SSD, but like a mid-range GPU, or a mid-range SSD and a super beefy top of the line GPU? Every PC gamer on earth knows the answer to that question. You go for the beefy GPU and the just mid-range SSD, because any SSD is great, you don't need, and that's like, yeah, I repeated it over and over because Sony fanboys, they started trying to act like the SSD is rendering graphics, like the PS5 is going to do better graphics, or the PS5 does better graphics because it has a faster SSD. Like, they're so stupid. Like, that's not how it works, I don't care how fast your console loads, it can't render graphics. The SSD, period. But they try to confuse the issue and conflate everything, and but it's loading in the assets. So if you can't load in the assets fast enough, like the Series X can't, then although there's no proof of that, but then blah blah blah, and like it's like, if that was true, why would you even need RAM? Why do these consoles have 16 gigabyte of RAM? And if you look, the speeds of RAM bandwidth are like 100, 300 times what the speed of SSD bandwidth is. Like, there's no comparison. Anyway, so that was all stupid, but the point is that PlayStation fanboys really hyped up this SSD because it was the only advantage they had, so they had to hype it up. I told them, and I made the point a million times, that if they could have flipped hardware, if Sony fanboys could have had the Series X hardware and stuck the Series X with the PlayStation 5 hardware, like 99% of them would have taken that deal in an instant. They won't admit it now because, of course, that can't happen. But in a theoretical world, they would have switched hardware so fast. Anyway, so they all hyped up the SSD. The SSD was so great on the PS5. You heard all this garbage about it. It almost became like SSD is more important than anything else on a console. Doesn't matter how much RAM you have. Doesn't matter how your GPU. It's all about this. Of course they said that because the PS5 had a better SSD. Well, now, here's my point. Now, they don't have a better SSD because every developer is going to have to sit there. I'm talking about the PS5 SSD is really bleeding edge now. This article outlines it nicely. They basically put a slower drive, 3,900 megabytes reads, 3,200 megabytes writes, whereas Sony recommends 5,500 megabits a second, right? So this one only... It even says it. If you experience problems with playing a game installed in M.2 SSD storage, try installing in console storage. This throws everything out the window, alright? I had no idea Sony was doing this. The only way Sony was going to be able to integrate this type of top-tier SSD speed they had, and believe me, I don't think it was a big deal anyway. It wasn't going to change the game in any way or anything. We've already seen that, but you know, even if you believed it did, even if it was something that the PS5 had that the Series X didn't, you know, even if it was a nice little feature, load a little faster, whatever you think it may have been, it's gone now, because Sony has got to support all these dinky drives. I guess you can put any PCIe Gen 4 drive in here. They're going to have to support every drive. I don't know if they have a minimum speed or anything, or how that's all going, but they have to support at least down to 3900, 3200, you know, because they supported that. It's confirmed. One of the slowest PCIe Gen 4 drives they could find. So, you see what I'm saying? It's slow. So they cannot count on 5500 megabits per second anymore, megabytes per second. They can't. They have to make sure, like every Sony developer now has to think, well, Billy Joe Bob's going to go out and he might go buy a SSD at the dollar store. You know, yeah, Bob's Computer Emporium. That's from made in Afghanistan, you know, and it's a piece of junk, but he's got to support that now. You have to support everything your customers might use, you know. It's a really, so they're not going to be able to you're not going to be able to count on that super fast SSD. That's not your lowest common denominator anymore. Your lowest common denominator just shifted big time here. The PS5 SSD is not even faster than the Series X SSD anymore. The one advantage, this is huge, man. This is huge. And no one's talking about, all the Sony fanboys are on Twitter talking about this Linus Tech Tips video, talking about how, oh, Linus is right. You see that? It was smart to do this, and blah, 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 blah. It's fat, you know, it works great, and this is better than the Series X, and no, it's terrible. It's because they just fundamentally changed. They fundamentally crippled the PS5 right there. The only advantage they had, the super fast SSD, is gone. Now they have to support dog-ass, slow SSDs that Billy Bob's going to go buy from Kmart and put in his PS5. And the developer has to support that. Because Billy Bob's going to be mad if it don't work, you know. And the PS5 is going to get a bad reputation if people are buying a bunch of drives, sticking them in there, and they don't work, you know. So the developers, they've got to support every, like, let's say a developer needs the speed of the PS5 SSD to make a certain level a certain way. You can't do it now because you can't count on that speed anymore. Now, I guess, in theory, you could tell people they have to install to the PS5 system drive, the one with all the speed, the lowest common denominator speed. But first of all, that's never going to happen, okay? That just gets into all kinds of issues. Sony's not going to sit there and be like, well, you can put a, you know, M2 drive extra storage, but it may or may not work in the future on your games, you know. That kind of thing is just anti-consumer. It ticks people off. You know, if it was Xbox doing it, they'd get ripped for it, you know. Like, if Sony later on comes out and says, man, we got this game, Uncharted 6, it's really stressing the hardware. Oh, you know, you got to have an M2 SSD with 5500 read speed. So all these people with SSDs with 3800 read speed, Billy Joe Bob doesn't know nothing about tech. He's going to come home, try to play Uncharted 6. He's not even know the difference between his internal hard drive and his external hard and his expansion storage. He's going to try to load it on there and it ain't going to work. And he's going to return it or be like, what the heck's going on? Sony's the worst company. It's so stupid. You know what I mean? You can't have that. You have to have good experience for your consumers. So, I'm just here to point it out. Because nobody, and I think one of the craziest things about this is not even that this happened or anything, but just the utter radio silence on it. Like I have seen people talking about it on message boards, but it seems like the vast minority to me, almost nobody's even mentioning this. And this is a game changer, right? The only advantage PS5 had, the SSD, it's gone. Okay, it doesn't have a faster SSD than Series X anymore. It no longer can count on that super fast PS5 SSD that we heard so much hype, so much hype. I mean, we heard an unbelievable amount of hype about this SSD, you know, like we always do with Sony. And the gaming media played up this SSD to no end. You know, it's going to be so fast, and you know, the Ratchet and Clank game, you can go through the portals and load your next level. You know, whatever. Like Series X couldn't do that. You know, and blah, 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 blah. And so the gaming media fed us all that crap, and they were complicit with Sony and feeding us all this crap. And they're not even going to mention now that's all out the door. Because Billy Joe Bob can buy any slow-ass SSD, as long as it's compatible, throw it in there, as long as it's PCIe Gen 4, and it's going to, you know, degrade the experience, degrade the game. The portals are going to go slow in Ratchet or whatever it may be. The developers going forward, they cannot count on these fast SSDs. Nobody's going to make a game and be like, well, I want the SSD speed to be 5,500 megabits per second because I'm going to load this level so fast. No, they got to worry about Billy Bob and, you know, the 10 million people that are going to have Kmart SSDs in there. They got to support them. Sony probably wouldn't even let them release it. You know, like if they tried to release something that, you know, half the people's SSDs wouldn't work on, Sony'd be like, nah, sorry guys. Like, this would all be behind closed doors. Sony wouldn't tell you about it, but they'll tell them, you know, before you get certified or whatever, make sure it works on Billy Bob's Kmart SSD. You know, we don't want people getting mad about it and, you know, giving us bad publicity or whatever it may be. So yeah, I just wanted to make this video to just point out that this is a huge deal, and Linus Tech Tips got it all wrong, and no one's talking about it. Now, I will say that I do think a lot of people were really ripping on Sony when it first came out that, oh, there's all this, you got to get the right heat sink, you have to open up your PS5, you have to install the M2 SSD, and it's really expensive, you know, but I sort of sided with Sony, and I said, look, on Twitter and whatnot, you know, I'm fair. I was like, hey, yeah, they're taking a lot of bad press now because they cost just as much, but it's a lot more of a hassle to install, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. But I was like, but the upside that nobody's really looking at here is that in the future, I'm sure this was the main thrust of Linus's video, but in the future, you know, they're going to be able to have third parties to play against each other, so you're going to get lower costs. You know, you don't have proprietary storage, so you're going to get, in the future, you could end up with SSDs costing significantly less on PS5 than it does on Xbox, okay? And I understood that, and, you know, I you know, at that time when it first came out, about like a month ago, when Sony first started on their beta firmware or whatever, started approving third-party hard SSDs and stuff, you know, people were giving them a lot of crap because, you know, it's like it was kind of hard to figure out which one you had to get. You had to make sure you got a heat sink, or, you know, make sure the heat sink fit. I think, you know, there was all this rigmarole, and it really didn't come across good. And Xbox was kind of gloating, like they made this Twitter post about how all you got to do is plug in. You know, here's how to upgrade your Xbox hard drive. You know, they just showed like a little picture of somebody plugging it in. And and a lot of Sony fanboys were getting all butthurt about that. Oh, my Xbox is being mean. What a load of crap. One of the most famous videos ever is like when the Xbox One came out and they were going to like go all digital and you weren't going to be able to trade discs and this and that. Sony came out with a video of them. It was one of the most famous videos in gaming history of a couple of their executives were like, oh, here's how we're going to show you how to loan a friend a game on PS5 or PS4 or whatever, and one of the execs handed the other, I think it was Yoshi or whatever the hell his name is, handed the other exec the disc, and he went, done, or whatever, something like that. And it was, you know, everybody loved it. Ha, they're sticking it to Xbox, you know, because it really just pointed out how easy, I guess, the Sony solution was. You didn't have all this Okay, so so that was like everybody cheerleaded that. Oh, that's hilarious. All the gaming media loved it. Like I said, it was one of the most famous videos ever. And now Sony, and just on Twitter, it wasn't even very famous. Xbox kind of gets in a little jab at PS5, almost the same, thing. And all of a sudden, I saw the PS5 fanboys on Twitter getting all, oh, this is so childish, blah blah blah. Come on. Anyways, but yeah, when that first came out, Sony was taking some heat, and actually I think that's why Linus made this video. But I was saying, kind of on the down low, but I was saying, I see like everybody's giving Sony heat now, but I see that in the future they could have lower prices, and that could be an advantage of the way they're doing it. But we'll have to see, because who knows what the prices are gonna. Because here's the thing, Xbox price can go down too, because I understand that the Xbox hard drive, it's like proprietary but not proprietary, if that makes any sense. Yes, they're going to license. Xbox basically said there will be competition in the future in the space, basically. Like Seagate makes the Xbox storage now, and in the future, they said there's probably going to be other manufacturers or whatever. So eventually you're probably going to get like a Western Digital Xbox hard drive, so on and so forth, And it's kind of like proprietary, but not really, if that makes any sense. It's like proprietary, but just the shell or whatever. The basic SSD, the NAND inside there and stuff, obviously isn't, and I think it might just even be software or something. So it's like proprietary in a way, but not in a way that affects costs, So we'll have to see. Wait for a year or two. There's no guarantee that Sony SSDs are going to be cheaper. I mean, they're slower, so they should be, but because like I said, Xbox has kind of promised that or made some sort of statement that there's going to be competition on our side too, like different people are going to make our drives. And so I would expect that probably the Xbox, they're probably going to keep a nice profit on there. So maybe the PS5 SSDs are going to run $20 cheaper or something, if I was to just, hazard a wild guess. Like if the Xbox SSD drops to $180 in the future, which actually, yeah, I think Newegg had a sale on it for like $186 a lot lately, which is already cheaper than these Sony drives. But let's say the Xbox SSD goes down to $180. At that time, I could see maybe the PS5 SSDs being available from different manufacturers for like $160 or something. There's no telling. That's what I'm saying. There's no telling. We'll have to see how it goes. And like I said, Xbox has said their side's going to have some competition too. I don't know if it's going to be as much as on PS5 because it's more controlled. They're just going to have certain makers make them. So yeah, but my point is, this whole assuming that Sony's going to be cheaper and all this, we don't know, and it may be just a little cheaper. It may not be a big deal, all that. So yeah, I just wanted to point it out in this vid. Sony really screwed up here. And the whole conceit of the PS5 about, oh, it's such a fast SSD. Oh, the lightning fast SSD tech. It's all gone now, all out the window. Now it's whatever Billy Bob wants to put in from Kmart, So, I'm putting it out there.